Hello, welcome or welcome back to the Instech podcast. This week you will hear a lot more of me as I actually feature with Matthew and our guests of this week, Rob and Lee of the F&O InsurTech podcast. We bring you this crossover, or rather return the favour, as Matthew featured in episode 250 of Rob and Lee's series. The F&O InsurTech podcast began as a marketing method, but has spun off as an integral part of Rob and Lee's careers in Alacrity Solutions. A podcast for podcasters about podcasting, and we'll be discussing where we think the industry is heading to next, and all the interesting things we have noticed from speaking to leading voices in the industry. Mixing voices from across the pond and within Instech, I hope you enjoy this episode. Over to Matthew, Lee, Rob, and me.
Rob, Lee, great to have you joining us. We've got a slightly different podcast today, which frankly I've been looking to do for a while, and I've got an excuse because you invited me onto your podcast, the F&O InsurTech podcast. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and it's great to have you on this one. We're going to be talking about what's going on in the US, a little bit around claims, and a little bit about best practices for podcasting. Might even be a few tips and hints in there for people who want to know how to perform well on podcasts. Rob, let's start right over in the West Coast.
I am a longtime insurance claims professional. I live in Sacramento, California. One of the couple of things that I'm still very active in and get to do is this podcast with Lee, which we launched in January of 2019. We're about 300 episodes, I think. And we met you a couple years ago, and it's a pleasure to be on your show.
Well, you're very, very kind of have you on yours. We've drunk some tea, we've had some beer, and we are all survivors in the podcast world. It's almost 300. Lee, why do you do the podcast? We all know how much work it is to do this. I know it's a little bit of benefit for Alacrity, but what is it about you that gets you up and about?
Yeah, I'm calling from Waco, Texas today. For me, the podcast has been a great opportunity to meet people and to learn more about the industry. And over all these years, we have met just the most fascinating people and been able to do some great things with the partners that we've met, with our clients, to interact and to meet. Every day is a blessing to be able to actually meet these people who are changing the way that insurance is done.
You're doing a digital podcast, but you're also fighting back against digital only entertainment, because you also have, I recall you saying on your podcast, you're one of the biggest decorators of your property around Christmas time, or the holiday season, as you might call in the US. And people actually come and, not only people come and visit your house, you actually have TV crews turn up and film your house. What's going on with that?
I do. I'm one of those people who every year add to my decorations at Christmas time. And it goes to music, and there are pathways that people walk, and people will come spend 30, 45 minutes sometimes at my house. It's just a little hobby that I do that I've done it for about 20 years, and it just gets a little bigger every year.
Well, more will be revealed. And we've got another special guest today. So Zoya is joining us. So you may have heard Zoya as doing the introductions to our podcast. And because we're talking about podcasting, Zoya has kindly agreed to get around the other side of the microphone. So Zoya, people have heard your voice, but they probably don't know much about you. So
I'm Zoya. This is my first job out after finishing uni. I fell into insurance rather randomly, as most people do, actually. And to understand our network and the landscape, I started listening to the podcast because it's a great way to sort of just discover it. And I fell into it quite deeply that I started just producing it with Matthew and Robin. And it's just a great way to understand mutual pain points and start conversations and just get the industry moving, really.
And it's why we all seem so well organized, because it's Zoya in the background doing it. Rob, I want to come back to you now. So you come over to London a bit. We've met a couple of times. What are your main takeaways from when you've been in the UK and then been in California about your experiences of coming over here?
We absolutely love going to London for the industry experience, which is very, from our exposure thus far, I'll say, is very unique. Here in the United States, insurance and the people who create insurance is distributed all over the States, all over the 48 continental United States. Whereas in London, there's this one section, it's a square mile, I believe, right? They call it. And it's very intimate. It's kind of warmer environment and group of people. because it's all consolidated together, and you all kind of live together on top of one another, and a lot of people know one another. The connections are great. Watching them after work every day in the pubs, and that's an experience that we don't necessarily get here in the US. And so that on a kind of a social level, that's been one impression that we've had of London.
Lee, what about you?
Yeah, so at Alacrity Solutions, I'm the vice president of TPA operations. That would be my day job. Podcast is the fun hobby that we've gotten to do. But as the vice president of TPA, I get to oversee our true end-to-end solution, as well as our desk within Alacrity's walls. So part of our TPA is working with the London markets as a delegated authority cover holder there, and come over and meet with the underwriters, meet with the brokers, everybody involved in that ecosystem. So we come over. It's great. We can spend a week. We can see all sorts of partners. We can hang out. We can have a pint after hours. We can do all the things that we Americans think is so neat that people in London are just like it's just normal. But the best part is that everyone knows everybody. Everybody is connected. And then when someone leaves an organization, typically they're on good standing because it's such a small world. Where in America, a lot of times you might leave and then you might not be welcome back. Everyone over there seems to be very cautious about what they do. Now, I know that's a stereotype, and it's just what I'm seeing. But I do love how it's so connected, especially with extracurricular activities like the rugby games and the things like that everybody does. So we love to come over, but we come over once or twice a year just to get to see all of the people that we work with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and it's very beneficial that, it's not just everyone's friendly. I'm not quite sure if everybody is that friendly in reality, but it's nice to know they're being friendly to you. But it's that proximity that's great. It's being able to literally cross the road and see somebody else and do a bunch of meetings in the same day. It is very different from the US. It's kind of a good lead into the next question, actually, which is, over the years you've been doing the podcast, how has that influenced how you have seen the world? We all benefit by doing this podcast because we get a chance to meet some fantastic people and learn a lot. But anything you can sort of draw out specifically that you have learned from that experience?
The best benefit from the podcast is meeting people like yourselves, meeting people that we would have never met in a million years if we didn't have a podcast. Rob and I were recently at a conference, and we were walking up and down the halls, and we saw numerous people that we had on a podcast, fascinating people. And the podcast has brought us all together for this common good of how do we do insurance better? How do we help do claims quicker and more accurately? How do we underwrite better? How do we solve the problems like wildfires and climate? How do we do all these things? And the podcast, for me, has really just opened the doors to meeting these fascinating people. And it also has given us opportunities to see maybe where we could do better, right? Where our company could do better, where I could be a better leader. A lot of times we get life lessons, leadership lessons from founders of these companies. And I learned, wow, if I could just implement that in my life as a leader, I'm going to be a better leader. So those are a few of the things that I have gotten.
When we started the podcast, it was a marketing hack. Of course, in 2019, there weren't as many podcasts as there are today. It wasn't as common. And what our hope was is that we could boost the position of our company. I wanted to make Lee into an influencer. That was the goal. And we were both very surprised, and we've had long, long talks about this through the years, of the real benefits that we get out of the podcast, which are a deeper understanding of the business, a deeper understanding of the industry, widespread connections throughout it, and how those connections are helpful as time goes on. So it's not just that we're friends with people like Robin Roberson, but we do business together as well. And so the benefits are multi-level. And take Matthew, for example. Would we have ever met Matthew?
Just a quick question on, since there are so many more podcasts out there now, particularly on the insurtech landscape, how do you stand out? How is your voice heard in this sort of quite crowded space now?
I think it's important to know that we have not changed who we are because the competition has become greater. There is a niche. There is a niche that we attempt to fill Rob and I joke all the time on our podcast about how we are the only place to come hear all of your news in the world, and there's no reason to listen to any other podcast but ours. But we also say we know that we service a very small niche of individuals who want to hear about insurance and technology and how it's changing and what people can do. We kind of have a formula. It works. And our biggest thing is to make sure that there's value being added to the space. We want to find where is that lesson that somebody can take whenever that podcast is done. And we get that feedback. That's what's kind of kept us going in all these years.
I do think there's something quite nice about the two-host formula. You're always inflected with two different personalities. I find that with Robin and Matthew. Each time they do a podcast, it has like its own personality. And I think you guys have the same. Having two hosts is quite a really nice idea, especially in this space.
Yeah, the difference are is that Robin and I do ours separately.
I will say it is difficult sometimes having two hosts. Rob and I have, over the years, we've come up with this really smart way of doing hand signals where I point at him and he points at me to know who asked the next question. But it can be very difficult because he might be going down a path of questions and then I completely derail it and go down a different path. But at the other time, working in a group like that, we can a lot of times get the greater good. We can get to that more creative outcome where we places that neither one of us would have taken us individually, but working together, we found this new height during the conversation. So there is benefit to it.
We've done it individually many times because one is sick or out or whatever, but we always come back to doing it together.
We've had many great guests on the podcast. I was just wondering, what is sort of the secret sauce to a good guest that you found over the years? Is there anything particularly that you find works really well?
That's a really, really hard one to answer. But I will say the best guests are the ones who have a passion and a story to go with what they're doing. And it's whenever there's a true story, a founding story, those are the best guests. One of my very favorite guests, we had Jonathan Mantus, who is on for founder of ZenDrive now. He was a founding member of the Android group, right? One of the early people. That was years ago. To this day, I still know this story. And it was about how, the actions done and the things that he had seen and the things that he's been a part is driving this new company that he is doing. And he's so passionate about it. Whenever you get the passion and the story, that is a great equation for a great guest.
Some guests are enthusiastic too. I mean, I think that your enthusiasm is important. I'm thinking of Caitlin Johnson, who was with AmFam Ventures for many years. I don't know, we've had her on maybe 5 times. And the reason that we've had her on so many times, first of all, she's brilliant, and she's a VC that covers a wide range of insurtech companies, but just she loves it. And her enthusiasm makes her interesting and joyful. So a lot of it, I think, has to do with the personality of the guest. The story can really make a difference.
And what about top tips for not being a bad guest? How not to be a bad guest on a podcast?
Don't be afraid to talk, right? Sometimes guests will come on and they want to keep it, just a few sentences or just a little bit. Don't be afraid to get the ideas out, to communicate. We've also had a guest on one time where it was a 45-minute podcast, and I think we asked 3 questions, right? So I
don't think we asked 3.
Well, maybe 1.5.
You didn't ask a single question.
I literally went 20 minutes without ever speaking. It was a fascinating podcast, but
no, it wasn't.
Somewhere in between.
It wasn't mine. It wasn't my one, was it? By
it was not yours. We will not say who it was. Many, many moons ago. But a good guest is someone who speaks and communicates. That's one of the tips. The other is no one knows your business better than you on that podcast. And so if we're asking you questions that are not getting to the heart of what you want to talk about, help us out. Get us there. So as a podcast host, that's one of my advice for anybody who's hosting. Don't be afraid to let the guests kind of get you wherever you need to go. Because just because we're asking the questions doesn't mean we know what we should be asking.
The role that the person has matters. We usually try to have CEOs or founders on. And I would say that founder CEO is probably the single most common title of anybody that we've had. And the reason is, just like Lee was saying, nobody knows that business as intimately as they do. And when you're that intimate to the business, that's going to bring out insight and explanation that maybe the chief marketing officer can't bring. We frequently get asked, hey, our CMO wants to be on your podcast, or our COO wants to be on your podcast. We don't necessarily want it to be a part of your sales function. Not that that's bad, and we've done that, but not as the introduction of our audience to your company. That we want to be from the person who's so tied up with it that they bring that special added oomph to it.
And just start jumping in quickly, Rob, because we just like to make sure we help everybody with the acronyms. So CRO, you're talking Chief Revenue Officer, I think, rather than
Correct.
Chief Risk Officer, and
then
Chief Marketing Officer.
Oh, good point.
And it is a challenge sometimes if people feel they've got to either give the corporate line or are unclear of what they can say, which I guess the benefit you've got, if you've got the founder or CEO, they often are much more confident about what they can talk about, as opposed to somebody that's coming in at a different level. And it's particularly from insurance carriers, they're very careful about what they might say.
We are open also to have anybody's legal department on. Many times somebody's going to have a marketing person or a legal department just sit on the podcast and hear. We welcome that. We'd rather it be edited right then and there than 2 weeks later.
I'd like to do a podcast with the legal department and ask them why they're so miserable about allowing companies to celebrate who they're working with. How can you be celebrating innovation as an insurance company if your legal department goes, well, I can't let you say who you're working with? So let's maybe we'll do a joint podcast. Get some legal people else.
That's a big thing in insurance. My son is a co-founder of a tech company that does that works in e-commerce. And I mean, they talk about who they're doing business with and who their vendors are and who their customers are all the time. It's super transparent. And then there's the insurance industry at the other end. You can't talk about who your customers are. You can't talk about who your vendors are. It's that more conservative environment.
Yeah, I think that's why I appreciate honesty in a good podcast. If you don't skirt over the issues and you're quite open and candid about them, the listener ends up trusting you more when you're quite honest and upfront about it. So I always appreciate podcasts which are much more candid in that sense.
I agree with that. We don't like all the fluff necessarily. Just be honest with us. Tell us where you failed and what you're doing. And also a good failure story is also pretty good, because out of it can become great growth.
And we're just looking ahead for the year ahead. And my new rule now on predictions is people are only allowed one prediction, because I reckon if you give people 10 predictions, and we all know, we've got some good friends that do that, it's much easier to get something right. So I'll give you one each though, just to make it a little bit easier, and then we'll come back in 12 months and we'll see how you got on. So Lee, going to go for you first of all. What's your bet for the year ahead?
I think back to our interview we had with Mark at CCC, and he was talking about the intelligent experience, bringing the natural language processors to bring a intelligent experience to the customers. I think we're going to see more about that. Right now, I think we're kind of thinking a little small, and how do we do it in underwriting? How do we do it in claims? How do we do it in sales? Ultimately, somebody is going to come up and say, we're able to bring this and do an entire experience, not only for the sale of a product, all the way to the claim. We had a great conference that I went to a couple weeks ago where they talked about using underwriting data in claim modeling or in claim conclusions. And somebody who can bring this AI, this technology, so that you can actually use the information that you already have to quickly and accurately settle claims, you're going to be the big winner there. So I don't know if we're going to have a big Apple moment with the new iPad that comes out, but I do think we're going to have some key players who really expand what we can do as an industry.
That's great. Well, that's something we can come back and assess you on if you're up for it in the summer of 2026. Rob, what about you? What's your big prediction or your small prediction for 12 months ahead?
As the four of us all know, we're in the midst of tremendous upheaval of commerce in our world, not just in our countries. And I wonder how that's going to play out in the insurance world. I think that it doesn't, no matter what happens, it doesn't change the need or the importance of insurance, but how it's going to play between borders and whatnot is a big question to me. And I don't have a prediction about what that's going to look like in a year, because things in insurance don't particularly change that quickly. But I am thinking about the impact of huge changes in commerce and the way that business is done internationally that are to come.
Yeah, if we are into a challenging economic situation, that changes the dynamic of not just whether people buy insurance, but actually theft and false claims and all sorts of other things that come out of that. So I'm not going to let you off the hook. What's your forecast for the next 12 months?
I just kept thinking about change, and I think the biggest change we'll see will be from the industry exclusively. I mean, we've seen loads of companies come and go, but I was always struck the most by founder stories on the podcast and people who had an issue, who were underwriters or brokers, and then decided to leave and then solve that issue themselves. Those stories always struck me the most, and they were the most poignant. So I think if anyone's going to make the major change in the industry, it's going to be from those people. And that's where we'll see the most change.
I agree that most of the change today, that's a great point, comes from the inside. Mm-hmm. It bubbles up from the inside, not necessarily from disruptors, if you will.
Exactly, yes.
Coming from the outside.
I like to go back to what Robin said on your podcast that I just listened to, where it's best whenever you have a problem and then you go build a solution versus building a solution and then going out to find the problem. So if you can find people who see that there's a problem and to build that solution from inside, I think you're going to have great success.
Yeah. Robin Robertson as opposed to Robin Mertens. We would also, I'm sure, say wise things as well, worth repeating on the podcast. But there's accidental entrepreneurs, I call them. I mean, people just got so frustrated with their day job. They said, I'm just going to go and build a company. And so, the good prediction, Troy. You're looking out for somebody that is coming out of somewhere we haven't seen. They're going to do something very dramatic. I think you're quite safe on that. So just before we wrap up, what's the one thing we haven't talked about that is a kind of burning issue for you, or just you want to just talk about before we wrap up?
All I can really think about is the friendships that we have made throughout the podcast, the connections that are not even related. I think back to my network and how it's grown and how it is so important. And I speak on this at my day job, that building a network in our industry is one of the most important things you can do. Learning from individuals who have been down where you're going is something that you cannot overlook. So building your network. Rob and I built our network through years and years of sales and operation meetings, but we added this podcast, and it's been the best thing. So I would like to encourage everyone listening, build your network. Don't shy away from it. Jump in there and do that. You won't regret it. That's just one of the little tidbits that I have here.
That's great advice. Rob?
Zoya, you asked about secret sauce earlier in the podcast. And part of it for us is Lee and I, we have each other and we have each other's back. And because of that, we're still going 6 or 7 years later and we're having fun. And this is something that I think is important in life, but especially in work. If it's enjoyable, you have the energy to keep going. And we get a lot of joy out of this. We get to spend a lot of time being silly, and that's a lot of fun. And so I would say, a big part of our secret sauce is we like each other and we get to have fun. And so we just keep going.
I think that's pretty good. Zoya, what about you?
I would like to hear more voices from female founders. I've had situations where I've requested either a female C-suite person or a female CEO, and sometimes they've turned down the offer to be on the podcast. At Instech, we do a lot to empower the female voice, and I think I'd just like to hear more women on InsurTech podcasts, because there aren't many out there, really, and it's a nice niche to have and to be able to speak into.
We've had some good success with female founders. In fact, A few years ago, we were involved with a female founder competition in InsurTech here in the States. And I'll say that they're out there, they're busy.
Yeah.
They're busy people.
It's not just founders there. I mean, to Zoe's point, we are very keen to get broad representation. There's some people there doing some fantastic things at all levels of companies. And it goes back, I think, Lee, to your point before about just turn up. You don't have to be a CEO founder, but if you've got a story to tell or you just want to take a chance, and that part of it is trust. It's like a panel discussion. It's trusting the person that's interviewing you not to make you look stupid. And the reality is, it's very hard to be stupid unless you're a complete idiot. So I don't think there's any risk of it. But I think to Zoe's point, I mean, I would certainly, if anybody's listening, I think, I'd give it a go, but I'm not too sure. I'd just say, give it a go. And whether it's, with Rob and Lee or with us, just give it a go. And we're all very gentle, and we've got the ability to do some great edits and take out the stuff that doesn't work so well. So yeah, good. Thanks Zoe for bringing that one up.
One last thing I want to add to that, Matthew, is one of the things that I've really gained out of this is going across the borders. We started our podcast with just our little world in the States and interviewing. And then we've interviewed people from South Korea, Israel, England, like all over the place, and getting the viewpoints about what's going on and the knowledge that they've gained from past experiences, and they're bringing it in. That has been a blessing. So being able to really interview from all over the world, I feel like that's been one of the best things. So think big, right? Whenever you're building, when you're networking, don't think small, think big.
That's great. Well, we're coming up to the end of the time. You've been very gracious because you're busy people as well. And I know when you do your podcast, you give your host a chance to warm up first of all and have a bit of chat. But we didn't do it for you guys. So thanks for doing the Instech way, which is just jump straight in. I think you did pretty well. So I don't think we lost anything on that. Any final words from any of you? Lee, anything from you we didn't want to cover before we wrap up?
I think I just want to tell y'all to keep going strong. I've enjoyed listening to your podcast. Many times your name will come up as a influencer in the space. And so I want to encourage you both to keep going strong with your podcast, bring the best guests you can, get the best information. So good luck to both of you as you continue, and keep it up.
Yeah, and we love what you've done with extending the podcast into and using it as part of a whole offering of ideas and exchanges. It's terrific.
We need more companies like you doing what you do, sharing the knowledge,
Totally.
Getting the information out there, getting events where like-minded people can come together. We really think highly of that.
Yeah, well, don't tell anybody. We make money on our podcast. That's our
true.
Secret. So
we've yet to figure that one out.
Keep that to the two of you.
Yeah, we're still talking about that.
So I just want to talk a bit about how we do the leaderboard and when the next leaderboard is coming up, just as we wrap things up.
We've had great success with our podcast leaderboards, and we are releasing our next one actually this week, where I will be spotlighting the top 5 most listened to podcasts since January. So do look out for that on LinkedIn and on our newsletter.
Brilliant. Well, Rob, Lee, you'll be on the one after that, because I think it's probably, unless you completely blow the...
Yeah, we'll blow the doors off. We're happy to come back and talk.
Yeah. As we frequently say, this is the only podcast that you listen to.
That's right.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and we'll let you get on with your days, and hope to see you again face to face before too long. And Zoe, thank you very much for debuting as your first interview on the podcast as well. I think we did it right, didn't we? What do you think?
You did awesome. Okay? You did wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank y'all so much for having us on.
Okay, thanks. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Cheers.
Well, if you've made it this far, then I'm pretty sure you found that as interesting as I did. The Instech podcast comes out every Sunday morning, where we spotlight the latest news, leading voices, and freshest updates across insurance that you need to know about. If you would like to take part in these conversations, head to www.instech.co to find out how you can join our network and be a part of the insurance intelligence for the curious.